So thank you everyone for joining us on this last day, day 5 of our program for the AB InBev. We have today a group from IBM who's going to talk about their approach to some of the innovation and some of the latest technologies that are applicable to FMCG and to your business in particular. So I know that we have quite a few people from the IBM, so I'm just going to go with the introduction of Vincent, who is the global client executive at ABM for your account. He is both business leader and entrepreneurial. He has experience in negotiating with senior sales. He has experience negotiator and senior sales leader and account manager. So without further delay, Vincent, over to you, because clearly today I'm dyslexic. Thanks so much.
No, thanks a lot. Yes, indeed. So thanks to all of you for joining us today, the last day of your journey, if I understand well. So yes, we have prepared an agenda for you around reinventing your supply chain. I am very happy to indeed introduce you with your IBM team for today. So I am your global client leader. And first, I'd like to introduce you with Wouter. Wouter is your Chief Technology Advisor. He's working with me at global level in order simply to support you as one of our main clients from the consumer goods industry. Okay, both Wouter and myself are based from Belgium, around Leuven, but we obviously cover you globally. Okay. Then I'd like to introduce you with Christian. Christian Toft Nielsen is one of our most senior partners from our consulting division called GBS. And he will be speaking in 5 minutes about demand sensing. I also would like to introduce with Amar Sanghera. Amar is the global lead about our supply chain practice. And we are going to continue the discussion with Amar on continuous planning. And then last but not least, Marshall Lamb is the CTO of IBM Sterling, which is one of our supply chain leading products, on which we are currently having several discussions with you guys, both in the US, in Europe. He's also one of our distinguished engineer and made clearly his career in the supply chain. Okay. And before I will move to the next slide, introduce you with what we do at AB InBev for you for the moment, I'd like to also thank very much Mark. I don't know if Mark joined the call already, but he's working in our Silicon Valley lab briefing as a consultant. Okay, so this is also the agenda for today. I will just say a word maybe in introduction about explaining to you what we are doing today at AB InBev, just in 5 minutes. We are clearly aligned with your strategic priorities, becoming an even better beer company, but also reinventing yourself and be open to new models to do the supply chain, but also to embark on new solutions. Okay. This is the list of the topics where we believe we can help you. And next to that, you see the topics where we are currently engaged with you. Okay. And so that supports our ambition to become your digital transformation partner with a clear focus on 3 topics. This is artificial intelligence, automation, and data and analytics. Of course, there are many behind those 3 words, but we are trying to decline those 3 words around the different topics that you see listed here. Supply chain is one of them. For the moment, our biggest engagement with you is the people transformation program that we are doing for your people business. This is a global program. We have a team of consultants who are actually present in each of your zones. This is a project led from, I would say, a team based in Belgium, in New York, and in India, with a global presence as well. Okay, but the majority of the people we have working for you are in those 3 domains. Okay, next to that, we also do have already innovation squads, many working for the moment in North America. We are also extending that into Europe. Some of the use cases that we have already delivered for you are around demand planning and inventory optimization. We are going to speak today about supply chain, so I'm not going to speak about that now. We are also supporting you in some of your efforts around the Salesforce platform. And more specifically, we are discussing with your team in Prague, for example, or in India, about how we can improve your automation journey. And maybe we begin to also discuss with your teams in Brazil around your SAP program on how we could see multi-cloud as a competitive advantage for a company like yours. And we have a technology around a company that we have bought recently, Red Hat, which is highly supporting any kind of hybrid multi-cloud journey. Okay. So that was to give you a kind of a glimpse about the main topics where we are working for the moment today. And that being said, I'd like to maybe give the word and to transition to Christian for speaking about demand sensing.
Thank you. Let me see if I cannot share screen. Okay. Hopefully that works. Can you see it? Can you see my screen?
Not yet, Christian. If it's the first time you are sharing screen with Zoom, you might need to give access in your security preferences, and you might need even to relaunch the Zoom application. So if this is with that you are struggling.
It is loading up. Yep.
Okay,
yes.
Okay.
We have it.
Perfect. So, so thank you for the opportunity. So my name is Christian Toft Nielsen. So I'm out of Amag, New York. I've been working from home since March. So right now I'm in Connecticut. So originally from Denmark, and you know, you have to have probably the best beer in the world, which is Carlsberg. but I don't know if that's
no.
I'm close to you.
Christian, maybe we need already to move to the next topic. Sorry for that.
No, that's definitely not the best beer in the world. But so what I've been working on is an offering called demand sensing, and we'll go to the next page here to tell a little bit about demand sensing and how that came about. So when the pandemic hit
can you move to maybe the full screen mode,
yeah,
Christian,
yeah.
if it's okay?
So when the pandemic hit, a lot of our clients they were flying blind.
Christian, do you have okay, perfect. Yeah, so
okay.
Load it up. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So so a lot of our clients are using historical data to predict the future, to do demand forecasting. And that works well if your drivers of your demand remain constant. But when the pandemic hit, all those drivers changed overnight, and they really couldn't come up with a good demand forecast. And so we call it kind of the era of disruption. So right now we're going through the pandemic. We saw the relapse. We just gone through a election here in the U.S. So we have civil unrest. There's trade wars. So it's a lot of outside shocks and events that can impact demand forecasting. So what demand sensing is about is to augment your historical data with external data. So what demand sensing is about, so we have created a set of indices they're going to take you through. So how can these indices help us augment our forecast? And what other data like news data can help us improve that? So basically what we have is a set of curated external data, curated deep learning models that are features in a demand forecasting model. Then we have what I call a starter kit. We have about 8-9 pre-trained models. And you use those pre-trained models to see what, not all models would be useful, but we can also use them in an ensemble modeling. For example, one model is more precise in short-term forecast, and another model is more precise in the longer-term forecast. So you could put different weights on these models in an ensemble modeling perspective. And then, of course, we have the visualization, how this can be consumed through dashboard or through APIs or through the integration into however forecasting has been consumed today or into the planning book. So that's kind of the premise of demand sensing, and some of the key outcomes is much better forecasting, and that has a ripple effect on your profit and revenue, of course, if you can nail your demand forecast. And just stop me if you have any questions as we go.
Yeah, I have a question. May I ask? So, actually, just practicality wise, I just want to understand how does it work, because every company and we as well, so we have our planning tools. Okay, most of the zones working in APO, so we as international, so we are working with to open as a tool for planning. So and okay, every tool has certain capabilities for demand prediction. So I'm not saying now how different they are. They most probably are different, but they have. So like now when you are saying that you are working on this demand sensing, I don't know what is this tool capability or what, so then how then practicality wise it might be used by us? If it's kind of standalone tool which then should be integrated with our planning platform, is it, I don't know, something, I'm just thinking, because no one, I can guess, will not change the planning platform, right? So because it's something too fundamental to touch, then just make it a bit more practical for us.
Maybe if I may just, because we have an example of that for you in the North America zone, where a team from IBM is taking data from APO, is doing a new forecast outside of APO on your Azure analytics infrastructure, and then putting back the data into APO. So we are kind of bypassing APO, and this is already ongoing. We've been doing that for 6 months or a year ago, where the forecasts now are significantly better long-term, mid-term, and short-term, including weather data, but not yet the extra features that are being discussed here. So the way it works is indeed we don't fully rip everything out, but we do take the data out. We do a forecast outside of the system, and then we put back the results into the system. So that's practically how it already works for you guys in North America zone.
So
with an IBM team.
The typical journey, what we do is we start with the product line of SKUs that are most important to our clients, and we do that as a MVP, a proof of concept. We do that on the side, and then phase 2 is the scaling and the integration. And Amar, who's going to join us a little later, is going to talk about that integration as well, and how that can be done. And so for certain clients, for example, in groceries, they're not really concerned about how we forecast a can of tomatoes, but they're very focused on how we forecast goods that can get spoiled, or when they do promotions, to make sure that they get that right. So they might have a subset of SKUs that they want to have the big treatment on, and other SKUs that they don't want to have kind of this big treatment on. But to the point is, yeah, integration is very important. So you integrate this back into whatever platform you're using today.
Yeah, and if I may add, it's also important to integrate to other models like MEIO. So MEIO should not be a standalone, but should work together with the LDS so that you can take the most benefit out of it. Yeah.
Maybe I will ask one more, because it's super interesting this that you are doing something with the US, and you are doing it for the US domestics, for the domestic brands like Budweiser and the others, or you are doing it also for the international brands?
So this is local US domestic market, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
But in terms of brands, the question was in terms of brands, Walter. No, so we do it for the North America zone, and
all brands,
my
I think.
understanding is that yes, it's we are supporting your commercial team there. So I suspect, Adriana, that we just do all the brands they are selling in North America. Okay, I don't have a split by brands. I don't have the splits, to be fair.
But it's a
But
forecast.
Yes,
I can look. It's a forecast for all the distributors and the retailers, because you have the 3-tier model there in US, so it's different from Europe.
It would be just interesting to know, and I think Cami know, because we do also import Stella, for example. So it would be interesting to know if we are doing it only for Budweiser, or it's also for the Stella, because then you have a little bit different model, because Stella is coming from Europe.
We'll get you more info on that.
Yeah, that could be nice to know. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, my understanding is we do it for all of US, all the brands in the US. That's my understanding.
Okay. Thank you.
And I have one more question. Quick question is about the data. Like, what data are you using, or what data you use based on the company that you're doing this demand sensing? If you are buying data, if you are getting just data from the company, if you are outsourcing the data, how is this? I think this is a really important point of the process.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's a great question. I'm going to touch a lot more on the data as we go through this. So that's really the key component here. So what you see here is a snapshot on some of the data we are using in demand sensing, and some data matters to certain clients, and some data does not matter. So we test each of these data points as we implement the models. But high level, it's news data. So what we do is we ingest about 100,000 news articles every day globally, and then we do two things with that data. We do entity mapping, so this news belongs to this entity, and then we do news tagging, and the tagging of that news is specific to the client we're working with. So, for example, as we went through this, we did COVID tagging, kind of work from home, return to work. So we had like 37 different news tagging on COVID, and then we do geospatial as well. So this news came from this down to this region. So we can actually start, and you do this every day, so you can start using news as a feature in your models. So you turn unstructured data into a feature in your models.
Christian, a quick question on the data and so sort of the feedback loop. So for the perishable goods and for sort of maybe location or even store specific feedback, do you have some kind of the back feedback loop that's saying, hey, we over forecasted, or we forecast enough, or we didn't forecast? So for sort of like from this metadata to the actual data, is there some kind of the feedback loop that feeds into the models and sort of adjust them, or how does that work?
For certain clients, we do have that. So it depends client by client. but for example, in a big grocery chain, we do get store level data back, and then we get their sales data, and you then run through. So every month we go back and calibrate the models and say, did we over predict or under predict? And if can we tune the models in a different way, so we learn from the maybe error, and can do a better job. And some of these is ensemble modeling, and sometimes it can just be the weights on the models that we change. For certain clients, we go back 6 quarters, for example, and back test. Could we have done a better job having different weights on the ensemble models? So yes, we do have that feedback loop. Other clients do not have that feedback loop, so it all depends on the infrastructure and the feedback they're getting from the point of sales.
Thank you.
So we have this a lot of this data. So the way we do this, we curate this data and store all this data in the Cloud Object Store, and then we can connect to the Cloud Object Store where we have this curated data, and it can be consumed on any platform, any cloud, or Cloud Pak for Data. So we link directly to this data. So and then we will of course maintain this data and subscribe on this data. Some of this data is bought, was a question earlier question, and some of this data we scrape, and some of this data you might already subscribe to and can be embedded into this data engineering. And then we have our models, the machine learning, the deep learning models, natural language processing, and we turn that data into some features that could be used in our forecasting models. And then you see some of these. We do some transfer learning as well, as we might not have a lot of experience, but we use transfer learning to apply that to other areas. And then you see some example of persona-based. So it could be planning, store operations, supply chain, some other use cases around pricing, and how this can be used to be more sophisticated in your pricing. So go a little bit deeper here on the data accelerators. So this kind of data layer, Cloud Object Store, we have a lot of COVID stats. We have this for most of the world. Infected, so it's a lot of whatever we want to know about COVID stats. We also have policies and regulations. Are restaurants open? Are you allowed to move around? Or is closed down? All that has impact on demand. We have the socioeconomics data, unemployment. We actually just rolling out where we can forecast unemployment down to county or provinces, depending on the country. We use census data, and then location data is basically movement data. So how are the population commuting? Are they going? They could also tell us if they go to restaurants. Are they going to bars? And so what is the movement patterns? And then the news and blogs that I just talked about. And then of course we augment that with the client data. So what is your historical transactions, the product and customer hierarchy, and promotions, etc. So what are all the internal data that matters? And then we have these indexes so that are very novel, and I'm going to go deep in a couple of those. One is we predict resurgence. So what is going to happen? We go out 3 months now. So based on, for example, policies, if we predicted, where there's a big, if you have to do indoor, if in the south of US, for example, it gets so hot and humid that everybody goes indoor in the air conditions. So are you allowed to visit bars? How open is the economy? But also that can those actions and policies also translate into resurgence. Right now, we working on the vaccine. What are the impact of that vaccine, and how is that going to impact resurgence, and how is that going to impact the next one which is disruption index. And the disruption index is a 40 days out view of the economic risk and activity in the US at the state and county level. In Europe, you go down to provinces, Bundesländer. So it depends a little bit about the country. But basically, what this would tell us, what is the economic activity going to be, and it's highly correlated with COVID data. But also we use commodity index is kind of how is the stock market, or how are we betting on commodities going forward, and you combine that in a deep learning model, and you get a view of disruption. When the first pandemic hit in for example in the US, we had clients who say, where should I open stores? Should I keep my stores open? What foot traffic am I going to get, and what it's going to be curbside or much more e-commerce. So all this helped them understand those signal and translate that into the forecast. Then we talked about the mobility index. So what is the movement of people? And then the last one is here we call it consumer safety index, but we kind of call it the fear index. And I'm going to go a little deeper on that, but this is basically for example, we help some airlines understand travel. The route might be open, in the governor of a state, or they might have an open economy, but that doesn't translate into how the consumer behave. So this was kind of measure what is the fear of going to a restaurant, what is the fear of going to a bar, fear of flying. And right now, what we're working on is what is the fear of the vaccine. So we might have a vaccine, but will they actually use the vaccine? Because that's going to be super important to understand how open, what the demand is going to be 3 or 4 months out. How we're going to react to the vaccine. And then we have the accelerators. So around in the NLP, our models. So again, we have 8, 9 different pre-trained models. Of course, I have to get trained again with the client data, but there's settings and it's been trained on previous engagement. So let me pause here. See if there's any questions.
I can guess this data, it like really depends on the market. So you said that you build it for USA because I don't know, this news, blog post, whatever. So if you would need to build something similar for other market, or so like how difficult it would be to build it. So, and how I would say how depends, how big a dependence of this data from the country or from the market.
Yeah, so some of these, most of this is actually available worldwide. So the COVID stats and the disruption index is available worldwide. News is available. Certain languages are not, in the Middle East, it's not supported yet. But most of this is available globally. So it's not specific to US. So we have this in many countries. Location data, there's of course different rules. It has to be GDPR compliant. So there might be some variances in I will say US has no privacy rules, right? And Europe has a lot of privacy rules. All right, so let's talk a little bit about disruption index. So, for example, to your question, how so we have this by if in Germany alone, we divide this up in 25 different locations. We have this in UK, we have this in Italy, some in many countries we have it, and if we don't have it, we have a methodology to create it pretty fast. So basically, what the disruption index help us to understand is the risk of doing business at a county or regional level, and it's also, we know, the consumer demand is very heavily influenced on the response to COVID. And again, I use COVID as an example here, but there's many other disruptions, and we will use other indices to understand that disrupt. The input to this is COVID stats, but other disruption indexes we will have will be other inputs to understand what is the risk of doing business. So we have localized information, and then what we really use this for is to understand the current risk of doing business, and how that's going to look out in 45 days for now, and why this is important is to understand the demand, of course, and then if the client has stores operations, what should they do? What should they do? So one of our big clients here in the US is a big electronic chain, and when COVID hit, they had to shut down, and then they wanted to start reopening, and they actually used the disruption index to formalize a strategy by at the regional level. Should it be curbside only? Should it open the store? Should it be e-commerce only? So that really helped them understand what are the action they should take in order to respond to this. And of course, in for your business, if there's no travel, I'm sure you have different segments, and hospitality, shut down, and bars, restaurants. So all this help to understand what will the demand be based on the economic disruption and the actions that government, states, and cities are taking. So this is basically kind of so it has a big forecast relevance, and a very important feature in a lot of our demand forecasting models. We did this for a big CPG company, and for example, when they were selling cookies, and they were still selling cookies, but it's also helped them to understand that family packs would go off the shelf, but single pack, which might be something you serve in your office as part of the snack collection, did not sell at all. So it's not only cookies, but also what size cookies should you produce. Then the other index is what I call the Consumer Safety Index, or fear index, is it's also a very important feature in our models. So basically, it understands how the consumers are thinking, the sentiment around this. And what we do is we ingest and we buy that data, but we ingest a lot of real-time media posts. And using a deep learning model, we extract sentiment and emotion out of what the consumer are telling us, what are they posting, and then we can test for different things. So one is so we use this to fear going to a grocery store, fear going to a restaurant, fear of traveling, fear of dining out. And right now, what we're embedding now is what is the sentiment of fear around the vaccine. And then we use these sentiment. We can see how that changed over time, and then we can integrate that as features in our model. And again, the objective here is to enhance our accuracy and do a better job of predicting. For example, and you also, so we do this geospatial as well. So for example, what we saw in the US is very on the East Coast. You know, if you take, there was much more fear in New York, for example, than compared to Texas or South Carolina. So you see a lot of regional differences in the fear index as well. So a consumer might be perfectly okay to go to a bar in a certain area, even though they have the same infection, and not be willing to do that, and you know, be very fearful of doing that in another segment.
Christian, just maybe 5 minutes left, if it's okay for you. I know you're reaching the end.
Yeah. So this is just kind of how it works. So we have all this data we ingest here. We have the labeling, and then we do the transfer learning, and then we get the sentiment out of this, and again can then embed this into a model. This is a little bit about the relapse. I talk about how we predict relapse of cases, and of course the vaccine is going to be a big driver of that going forward. So what is the caseload, and again, how is the vaccine rolled out and adopted? It's going to have a big impact on the relapse, and understand how your demand is going to be 6 months out, for example. And we talked about the mobility data. We talked about some of the ensemble modeling. So we do some time segmentation, we do time series, and then we stitch it all together. When we started this, we did not have the luxury of training in sets. So now, you know, we have been through this disruption in 8-10 months now. So typically what we do, we go in, we get 6 months of data, and then we use 4 months for training, and then we predict 2 months of actuals, and then we can ensemble the right set of models together to get a very high predictive power. And typically, last slide here, how we kind of do this, we do this in sprints. So we do garage sessions, where we talk about what are the key pain points, what is the MABE, where do you have issues forecasting, what are the key drivers of revenue, profit. So what we typically start with is where the money sits, and where we have big concerns about the MABE, and then we will do this we will start with that, and do this in the number of sprints, and typically a 6-week sprint, we have the first set of products done, and then to the earlier question, we will then go through the next set of products and start the integration into the current planning book. So that's how we typically works. And then based on this, now we're going to hand it over to Amar around continuous planning. So this is a new offering that IBM is rolling out, and demand sensing is a key element of that.
I have a few questions. I don't know if maybe they will answer in the continuous intelligent planning, but I would like to know, because giving you context, and we work for the international business, so it's basically import and export, so long lead times, right? So which are those external factors that make sense for demand sensing for international, right? Because maybe, for example, the consumer safety index doesn't make sense because we're talking about real time, and then in 2 months, my perception or my feelings will change, right? So which are those like external factors that definitely you need to have for demand sensing for long-term forecasting?
Yeah, no, you're right. Some of these depend on your forecast horizon, right? If you do, if you do brew for Christmas, right? You want to know what that demand is, but I don't know how far in advance you have to plan for that. So you're absolutely right. Some of these matters, and some would not matter depending on your forecast horizon. Absolutely.
And for the long term, let's say 3 to 4 months horizon, which improvement in the accuracy should we expect from the model?
So it all depends. So we have seen everything. You're seeing 25% for a CBG company. It all depends on how good or how bad your current performance is. And so it's hard to answer that question, but I will say we have I don't think we've done a project we didn't see a double-digit improvement in the accuracy.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Thanks for your time. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to just send me an email or reach out.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Christian. Amar, do you want to take it over?
Yeah, thank you. In fact, when I was listening to Christian presenting, and there were some questions which were specifically about how does it all come together, given that you already have an investments in your planning solutions and your landscape. Demand sensing is one part of it. And what we spoke about is that how can that coexist or work with your existing solutions? And IBM also, kind of we do recognize that, there are strategies for implementations which are being used. So we have actually come up with a solution for building out what we call as an intelligent and smarter supply chain planning solutions. This includes bringing in the capabilities like what Christian just walked us through, but not only that, but we also focus on bringing in capabilities around actual running through the planning process, building automation workflows, which can help improve your planning, not only from what and how it happens in a system, but more from a planning persona perspective. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover next few slides, what we call as a continuous intelligent planning solution. This planning solution essentially focuses on the planning process, starting right from demand planning and demand sensing, and takes us through to actual execution control. So just going to spend a few minutes. I know, Christian's had a lot of background about how in the current context of supply chain, especially with the COVID situation, as well as global challenges, we now have a supply chains getting stressed with not having enough information with which can help them take the accurate forward-looking decisions. There are pressures both on the supply side as well as on the demand side. And we have seen a lot of our customers talk about having much higher inaccuracies in the SNOP planning process. They've talked about how they are actually seeing much larger errors in forecast accuracy, much higher deviations in their on time in full and other metrics they might be using to track the supply performance as well. So a lot of that is also linked with how many supply chains have grown. They have seen growth of multiple systems, which have often led to multiple master data systems or underlying planning systems. not everything is always standardized in one planning application. So a lot of our customers actually see they might be using SAP APO. There might be pockets where they might be using Kinaxis. There might be pockets which are actually using something very manual. So how do you get all of these applications and systems aligned to be able to access and work on a single set of data? Leads to a lot of challenges. And also then over and beyond, there is a process challenge as well, which is getting all the partners as well as the organization elements to start working on consistent processes and consistent goals, not necessarily same process. There has to be regional and subsidiary specific deviations, but having a consistency in how do you approach the KPIs, how to approach the data access, and how do people view the same set of data, that has been a traditional challenge. So we have focused on all of this shift we have seen is in the landscape, in the application landscape, the shift in the processes as well as the need for collaboration. We are seeing more and more organizations are now looking at solutions which can run and span across multiple applications and not necessarily be tied to one. So in view of that, what we have started looking at is now, how can we build a solution offering and a solution which is one, allows for different platforms and ecosystems to exist, can tie together multiple teams which could be geographically dispersed to be able to work across a single set of data views, being more customer centric, and then also infuse all the capabilities of AI and ML, which can be as point interventions, but still maintain the existing investments which have been made and kind of like amplify the benefits from those. So what we essentially looked at is in the solution, if I call what we call as a continuous intelligence planning, this is essentially a solution for improving three major aspects in the supply chain planning process. It's very squarely centered around S&OP as the central theme. But then it also makes sure that we focus on how do we help the organizations predict better. So the demand sensing solution is the first leg and the first element of that. The second piece is the touchless planning, which essentially is what I call as hyperscale or extreme automation in the planning process, which means it cuts across various planning processes. It cuts across the planning lifecycle of S&OP and post S&OP execution. How can we automate the processes, for example, DRP netting? How can we automate the processes for order allocations so that the planners can actually focus more on managing the actual exceptions which need their attention rather than doing the routine and the mundane tasks, but then also using AI not only just as an automation task, but also helping it understand and intervene ahead of time when it can see potentially things could go wrong. And then finally, bringing in the visibility view. I know control tower is a much a misused term now. So what we are looking at when we say visibility, it is bringing in a 360-degree view of the process orchestration as it is happening, and make sure based on the criticality of information and the disruptions, they can be appropriately not only brought to view, but then, as I was mentioning in the touchless planning, they can be managed on an exception basis as well. So what we have looked at when we say CIP as a solution offering, this is essentially our consult to deliver approach of enabling a consistent continuous planning process, which is bringing together your monthly planning cycles of S&OP and linking it with the daily processes of S&OE, which is making sure the execution is happening on time and others. How do we enable it? We enable it using various tools like, as I mentioned, the demand sensing and the AI interventions, which really help us make sure we are on track with doing driver-based forecasting, bringing in capabilities of demand sensing. We bring in the control tower view, which allows everybody to see the same common set of metrics. But then over and above, we bring in capabilities of smarter automation, which allow us to take care of, for example, order and delivery monitoring. We bring in capabilities of simulation planning, which allow analysis of the same set of plans with the financial impact, marrying in and bringing in analysis capabilities, which allow planners to really simulate out how the alternative supply plans and the challenges will lead to impact on your metrics before taking those decisions. So the decisions can be made not only in view of that. So this solution essentially, if I look at from a construct purpose, it is a solution which layers on top of your existing solution. So typically you might already have a planning solution and an ERP platform, which already might be looking at new product introduction, demand planning, capacity planning, and others. Our solution actually layers on top of it and besides it. It's kind of like a wraparound solution, which complements it by providing integration-based interventions and also weaving in workflows, which allow your planners to build out persona-specific workflows, for example, for demand sensing, for NPI and promo management, for manufacturing planning, and for allocation, which means they can focus on their persona and they can focus on the activities and not necessarily have to depend upon how and in each individual application where that is happening. And wherever there are gaps, our solution works with your team and your solution teams. For example, it could be SAP or it could be E2Open or others to help bridge that solution gap as well. So when we look at the delivery of the solution, it is essentially an approach to work with your team to come up with one each individual components like demand sensing and the models that can start as the innovation garage, which can start quickly bringing in the external data insights and then working with the team to come up with agile releases of capabilities for each of the continuous planning functions for demand sensing, promo management, and dynamic allocation, so that for each individual capabilities, we can start enhancing value based on those workflows which we generate. So I'm just going to take a pause here. So I know that the team was interested in understanding how does it coexist with existing systems. This is just a high level view. I have subsequent more information about how do we integrate, what are the tools we use for integration, etc. So we can dig deeper on those as well. So I'll skip over. The next one is essentially how the use cases change. We essentially allow, based on the new workflows and others, it basically is changing the persona-based view. Typically, this solution is focused on the planning analysts and the planning directors. They are able to see their KPI-specific data. They are able to manage the workflows across multiple systems in a single dashboard view. And then because we also infuse in AI and the simulation capabilities, they can bring in the data and consume that data to take those decisions real time rather than having to access multiple reports and multiple systems to take those decisions, specifically, for example, around allocation decisions, which might require them to fetch information about inventory, about supply plans, and the current in-transit information. We try to bring in all of that information together and run simulations which can allow them to take those decisions better. So from a solution perspective, this kind of like fits in with as you know the experience which your organization also tries to give to the end customer. The same way we take a multi-layer approach. This solution can be deployed over cloud, and it kind of like fits in along with multiple other solutions you might have, along with your ERP systems. So all the underlying systems like ERPs, you might have SAP, Oracle, or others. It can integrate back with those. This is essentially a fully cloud-based containerized deployment. So it allows all of these workflows which are already built in. They allow for interacting with your transactional system data, pull in the information, and then generate the data and the analytics based on IBM's containerized solutions, which can run in your Azure cloud. They could possibly run in IBM cloud or any other cloud of your choice. But all of these components are pre-built, and there is an ability to choose which components you want to deploy first. So we can start with enabling demand sensing first, then start looking at demand forecasting and NPI, then bringing in S&OP processes and demand sensing. And each of those get exposed to the business users using the IBM control towers for their visualization and control.
So a quick question here. So it all looks really really fascinating on the paper, but bringing together very big sets of data, usually, especially from the big organization that is international, that has a lot of different data sources, every team almost doing this differently. So how can you actually bring the data to the common denominator? When we're saying about, let's say, supply planning, if that supply planning, I would assume that the data that would be used in Europe would be different from the data and the format of the data and the flow of the data and the timing of the data that is happening in US. So how IBM approaches sort of standardizing this data across many sort of siloed system to bring to this sort of like control tower where everything is brought to the common denominator.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so the subsequent slide actually talks about the modern data architecture, right? So the main aspect here is we actually create the solution in a way where today you might have multiple systems which are running on different schedules. So, for example, your current SAP, which is processing the shipment information or the shipment orders transactions, they might have a different schedule of making that data available or pushed to the data warehouse. Some of the data construct or the structures might be different. The new approach with which IBM tries to deploy is based on your transactional and operational applications. We actually build in what we call, this is the layer in between. This is what we call as our data fabric layer. This is the layer which actually allows us to create the data canonical models. It allows us to create different data consumption models as well, which means because they are on cloud, we create the simplified form of standardized data and stored in, I would say, in the whole data service layer, which means if you already have a data lake, which is catering to Europe, or if you already have a data lake, which is catering to US, the data services will pull that data to start normalizing it across from how does the common denominator of the supply chain information look at it? What does the core definitions of, for example, a shipment mean? And then it is not necessary that all of the data will be pushed together into a single data lake view, right? Because it is all containerized, I could actually run the data view for Europe. I could run a data view for US, not necessarily having to merge it together. But the layer on top, the data services layer, allows us to do the translation, which says, if this is the information in Europe, this is the information in US, this is the correlation for them. And then we use the business services to actually start presenting that using for self-service analytics or for the dashboards, which will be exposed on the control tower. And this is the secret sauce which essentially is around the intelligent workflows. This is where, as I was showing on the previous slide, this is where we are building those workflows of what is the sequence of data interchange as well as persona-based activities which need to happen between those systems. And then how do those translate and those interact with your data, which gets ingested from different systems, like your operational systems. One could be in SAP, another could be on another ERP, or you have another acquisition, which might end up in another ERP. How does that bring in? The data services layer allows us to do that data standardization and normalization. And these are all what we call as fully containerized deployments. So they can run on Azure, on Google Cloud, or on IBM Cloud.
Just a question here. So in this case, Control Tower is not only about bringing together the visibility from different systems or things, right? It's about going into the Control Tower and being able to action something that then it will be deployed into the other systems that we have connected.
That
so
is
we can
right.
actually take decisions in there and don't go like, okay, we see that there's an action that we need to do and then we need to go to the other system. No, we can go there and then we will have everything there.
That is right.
Action.
That is right.
Yeah,
so the intelligent workflows are
and I'm just going to say that this is Marshall. After Amar's done, I'm going to talk about control towers and we'll go into a little bit more detail about that.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. Because also maybe we can maybe put some questions which then we can come back later on, because that is a bit something which is not fully clear for us and we are looking the answers for, because everyone is talking about the control tower, but at the end, you see in our planning system, so we also have a view on quite a big scope of the processes, and we can react in this system, so we can directly, I don't know, make certain things and it would appear everywhere. So just really would be interesting to understand what is the difference, and also who is like, if it's standalone platform, so like here I understood it's a kind of standalone platform which is connected with planning system, maybe TMS system, with other systems where we have the transactional data or where we have the view on the specific events. So we need to track during this journey. If it's like standalone system, how the users who is participating on this process using it. So do they do not need anymore to go to their transactional systems, like to make something in APO? Would it then they need to go and work only with this control tower? So my, I don't know, transport planners, yeah, just the planners, production planners, or S&P planners, or whatever other participants of the chain. So would they need to work all in this control tower, or it still should be like, everyone is working with their system for their particular process, but then we have consolidation somewhere? But then who is that people who is working with this control tower to execute their proposal from the system in other systems? It just, maybe it's a bit, yeah,
No, I hear you.
simple questions, but that is something which we are a bit struggling to understand from the concept perspective. So
no, I hear you. So typically, so there are two shifts. Yeah. So in this slide, I have actually mentioned there are shifts which are happening, right? So a lot of times when people work on a single system, they are typically in this mode. A lot of times they are working on their own individual system. They need to fetch information from others. Some of that information can get automated, sometimes by reports, they get automatically pushed to them. But then they really need to crunch through the data. They look at so much data, and then they take decisions. So when we say we are looking to build a continuous intelligent planning solution, we are not only just giving them a simple UI. This is the piece which I was talking about, where workflows are created, which are tailored to what the person's role and their objective for that is, right? So when you say there's a transportation planner or an order execution, persona, the order execution persona will pull the information, what they need, and make it available not only on the dashboard for them to view, but also behind the scene. We use AI, ML, and automation to take care of removing some of the routine activities they do. So this is also kind of like a shift. I understand, especially in the supply chain, one of the customers who have deployed these kind of workflow solutions, they were able to eliminate around 40 to 60% of activities which were actually done manually. So kind of like the role of the people also gets reimagined of what they do now. So your transportation planners, if they currently spend around 50% of the time tracking the plans and looking through the plans, a lot of that activity will actually get eliminated, because within the control tower, we're not just bringing in the information from another system and displaying it in nicer charts and views. We're actually having an underlying workflows which are eliminating some of the activities with which they are, for example, could have been helping consolidate the loads or looking at the manufacturing plans and then confirming those loads. Some of those processes get automatically eliminated using automation and the workflows, and then they can only look at this UI to see if there are exceptions. But for any specific changes, detailed changes they want to make to the plans, they can still go to the UI for that application and do it. But then the kind of control cockpit of the process switches over and shifts to this control tower.
May I still specify it? Because let's imagine I'm transport planner. So will I work still in my TMS? Because what you are actually describing, it's a kind of automation of my job. To do the automation of transport planning job, I do not need actually control tower. I need to have good data, and I need to have the algorithms being set up. And then I, as a transport planner, would have less workload. So I can understand that it's maybe part of the data which I need to optimize the job of this persona might be the data from other systems. I can understand that this might require certain, I don't know, integrations, whatever, data exchange with, which we can organize in a different ways, depends on the complexity of the exercise. But in order to optimize my job as a transport, I do not need control tower, right? So my point is like, if I'm transport planner and then I have this transport and then I would have this control tower. So what would change for me? I understand I would still come to my TMS, right? In TMS, okay, I might have better, less workload because I might come some suggestion from the system what to do. Rather than I'm doing now, first checking what to do and then I'm doing it. So I can first get this suggestion. But I'm still struggling to understand how does it fully linked with the control tower concept, because it's more like, I don't know, command center or automation to create workstation for me as a persona to work, because I'm still working in the same system. I can guess my planners, S&P planners or demand planners, or they would still work in their transactional systems, right? So then,
yeah,
yes.
so Amar, if
Go
I
ahead,
can.
Marsha.
So there are different kinds of control towers. There's not a single concept of a single control tower. And we'll talk about this in a little bit more detail in my segment, but a control tower's purpose is to aggregate data from lots of different siloed systems, including TMS systems. So you're right, your daily job in the TMS system doesn't change, but there is an opportunity for the business owner, the inventory planner, for example, or the transportation planner, to have a aggregated higher level view to get an instant view in the health of the overall system and know where to go from there, where you may not get that view in a single TMS system, because there's not enough opportunity in that single TMS system to see an aggregated view of all the data points that affect your transportation planning, such as weather integration, understanding weather events and potential weather impacts to your transportation lines. That is where the control tower comes in. It's giving you a higher level view. And the personas that we target with control towers tend to be business owners or line of business owners, supply chain, chief supply chain officers or inventory planners. We'll go into more detail there, but just a quick answer, no, it doesn't eliminate your daily job of working the TMS system, but it gives you that opportunity to get a much broader 360-degree view of the health of the entire system around the TMS system to help you make other decisions.
Okay.
But then just a quick question on that. So it would be a place with a consolidation of the end-to-end, so it gives a great visibility, because it's truly from an end-to-end, and whatever it happens on the beginning, it will affect the end. It will give the visibility on that, but would also give the signal to if inventory person is changing, that the production is actually not happening this week, is in the next week, and all the bookings of the vessel needs to be rebooked. It will give the signal automatically to the person as well, like as a workflow, or we would still need to be via email saying, look, all those loads needs to be changed because it was not produced this week or something?
It's not an easy answer to that question. It depends upon the use case. That the primary, one of the primary roles of the control tower is to calculate KPIs and alert you when their thresholds around the KPIs are about to be, or on the trend of being exceeded. And that's where you get alerted, such as excess inventory on hand. You don't want excess inventory on hand. So it can, control tower can tell you that you have excess inventory. What do you want to do about it? Or in the case you have expiring inventory, you could have perishable inventory, and it will alert you through a KPI calculation. You have expiring inventory on hand. What do you want to do about it? But when there's a specific event, it depends on whether or not that can be reflected in a KPI calculation, or is that another discrete event that requires an alert. So we can explore each of those use cases and see what's the most appropriate way to surface that alert.
No, but I understood the difference then. Okay, clear.
And finally, is it standalone platform or not? So because I see platform assets. No.
Olga, yeah, so this would be, I wouldn't say a standalone. So this would be something which wraps around your existing system, right? And we can deploy it as modular cloud components. So if you have already are running, for example, say E2 Open as a SaaS, then it starts integrating with it, along with it. If you have your own bespoke on-prem deployment of SAP APO, it can integrate with that as a cloud deployment or in your own cloud environment as well. So it does not necessarily mean always doing a replication of data, but then the data which is needed for executing these smarter workflows, the data which is needed for making the control tower decisions and those alerts, that is something which we would pull using our data services and make it available so that we can either create workflows for automation, which are persona based, or we can make those dashboards and the views and the alerts which can be surfaced through the control tower.
Okay.
I have a different question, not technology wise, and is sometimes when we are deploying new solutions, the guys are very used to their Excels and trackers and different topics that they prefer over technology. So I was wondering, when you are doing implementations on Control Tower, how you manage the human element, that yes, you are putting a perfect dashboard or something that in theory will benefit, but how the human like psychology is work on there, because how you guarantee that really the people move to control towers and leave their practices?
No, I think you asked a really important question, right? I think the main part is a lot of times control towers, many initiatives, they've been done for quite a few years by a lot of companies. A lot of times they have less optimal adoption. One key reason being it's a duplication or replication of the data or activities of what they were doing in a spreadsheet or others, and it's just maybe a different UI to do the same thing. I think the biggest thing and the highest adoption actually comes when we also either bring in a new way of working or give them new capabilities which did not exist earlier, right? So for example, as Marshall was mentioning, if more than just the spreadsheet view or the dial view or the dashboard view, it actually gives them very, very specific role and persona specific insights, either using weather data, for example, or perishable inventory, what could be the potential impact on their KPIs. That is when they start using the solution better, because they start seeing AI not as some dashboard or something, but something which is augmenting their capability to do their job better or meet their KPIs and objectives better. I think when we have worked with organizations in trying to do this, that's why we call those as persona-based, specific, intelligent workflows. That's why we try to address those by individual workflows, because then we are able to not only give them a process-centric data, but then a workflow-centric data, which is, there's a difference between a process-centric view and a workflow-centric, because workflow-centric is more human-centric. It sees what is that person or that objective or the process trying to achieve. And that's when the adoption of the process or what we are trying to bring in improves. So taking this workflow approach, intelligent workflow approach, allows us to, one, reimagine their role, reduce the need for them to do repetitive or the mundane tasks, take care of exceptions automatically, which they can define by rules, and then give them more insight and more data and ability to simulate information so that they can take decisions better. So that's how we have seen, the implementations we have where the adoption has increased because of this reimagining of the role as the starting point and not as, here's the technology, now start using it.
Yeah, to put a different way, you have to be able to show value to that individual instead of just showing a better spreadsheet. We have to demonstrate a value to the users, to the stakeholders, and that value can come in different forms. It can be, as Amar said, additional capabilities they didn't have before, but they need, but also just to make it easier to do their daily work. And one of the easiest ways, in my experience, any adoption of technology has to be done in a piecemeal, logical, progressive fashion, where you start simple, you start small, you show value, and you show realized value, and then you grow from there. It's easier to go to your stakeholders, your business stakeholders who are working daily in their favorite tool of choice, and show, yeah, continue doing what you're doing, but look what I can do with that data and give you additional information. Not necessarily telling you dispense with the tools you're using every day, but here's some additional value we can provide based on the data you're working with every single day. Once they realize that value, then you can build on that. Because rarely does it work where you just say, okay, throw away your spreadsheets and move totally to a different platform, because then the human element becomes a problem. That type of, they're resistant to that type of change because it's very, very different from what they're doing every day. So you have to allow them to realize value while still working in the paradigm that they're used to, and then grow from there. And then it becomes a much better organic adoption of technology.
Okay, thank you.
Paola, this is Vincent. I would just add on that. First, thank you very much for your question, because it puts us a bit outside of the technology discussion that we always have. This is very key. I just would like to relate to my introduction call, where our ambition is to be your transformation partner. I would simply just remind you, for example, the big people transformation program that we are doing for you globally. This is a big transformation program of your full people function. And so what we also do with that is we have the typical change management aspect and people aspect of the transformation that we put in place. That starts with what we just described and Marshall explained, identifying the value to that, and lots of communication, implying the people at the very beginning of the transformation process, so that they can also see the value for that. So this is not just about kind of seeing a tool and implementing a tool. This is indeed really putting automation, AI, and analytics in your function. That is indeed very often really transforming the function as you do that today. So this is what we aim at doing, and I think we have some good examples with what we do for example, for the people.
Do you have good examples of implementation of this end-to-end control tower concept somewhere? Just curious to know if we can at certain moment just have a look in a more detailed way on existing cases, because even inside of our organization we have some zones and domestic people working on control tower, but at the end control tower is just two worlds compiling together. So then what is behind? So you can put whatever you want and call it control tower. So just till that moment, so we had, because we are very interesting to build something as a kind of end-to-end view, kind of maybe business insights and command centers in a combination of these things for international. But for a moment we didn't see any good examples where it works, so like how it works, who has it. So we really try to push this discussion across the market.
Yes,
but didn't find the good examples.
Yes, thanks. Marshall, I think Marshall will cover the solution later on. Is it okay for you, Marshall, to cover that question and maybe to include some references or some discussions about engagements we have while you are going to introduce? Okay.
That is my plan.
Yes, thanks a lot, Marshall. Yes, I think for the sake of time, because we are used, Walter and I especially, we are really used to those very good conversations, and thanks a lot for your enthusiasm and your questions. We also want to be respectful of your time. For the remaining of the meeting, may I suggest that you all use the chat room to pull all the questions that you have, either for the session of Marshall, but also for the previous ones, because maybe you have now a question popping up for something we discussed in the past. And we will make sure that we don't forget anything. If we don't have the time to answer to all the questions, we will come back to you later on. But I just want to make sure that we are, not forgetting anyone here also for the questions, okay? If it's okay for you all, guys, okay. Is it okay that we move to Marshall now? Yes, Amar. I mean, still a last word, or is it? I don't want to put the word. So is
thank
it?
you.
Yeah,
I think
are you done?
This was a fantastic conversation, because I think
Okay.
What I was bringing up is something which is a lot of times the connecting dot. And I think, I heard Olga ask that just the right questions. Like anybody can say, I have a control tower by just putting a UI, right? The main part, which a message I want to give you was about the intelligent workflows. That's where the information is not just about bringing data and showing dashboards. It's about the whole AI and the automation, which allows us to create those persona-based roles so that the end-to-end process can get reimagined, so that, instead of monthly S&OP cycles, you can run it on a daily basis and you manage and track it almost like that daily. You really know whether your plans or the impact to your plans based on any event which is external, or the decisions taken by your team, how do they cascade to the different metrics and objectives. I think that's where the difference between the UI based dashboard control towers and what we call as the continuous planning process, that's the big difference.
Thank you, Amar.
Yeah.
So yes, IBM Sterling is a solution that you have been using since many years at Labatt in Canada. You will hopefully very soon start using it as well in your North America zone, and we are having discussions with your European colleagues as well. So I'm very pleased now to give the word to the Chief Technical Officer of our Sterling solution, Marshall. And yes, indeed, maybe Marshall, as we already started, elevate even further the discussion from EDI up to those control towers discussion. So sure. Thanks a lot. Yeah.
Thank you, Vincent. So there's a really a lot of good discussion around the importance of a control tower concept in Amar's presentation. I think this is a good segue now into my section. Control towers are a concept. They're not a discrete piece of technology. And what we're finding is that there are common underpinnings, a platform that you use as a basis for building a control tower. But every time we engage with a customer like yourself about what a control tower means, we end up exploring what are the particular problems you have, which tend to be different than the next customer problem. And so every control tower tends to be, well, we may start with a commercial offering, but it gets massaged into exactly what you need. It gets modified, integrated with other systems based upon the actions that you need to take based upon the insights that we give you in the control tower. Because you said earlier, we need to have a place where we can see the alerts, we can see the disruption, we see a problem that's about to happen, but then we need to do something about it. And that action of making it affecting a change to your system is very specific to you. What are the systems involved? Who are the humans involved in helping make the adjustment needed is very specific to AB InBev. And so no two control towers are the same, but there's generally a common thread, a common starting point. And we do have a commercial offering around control towers that can be used as that starting point. And we're adding more of these commercial offerings around high-level use cases. So the one I'm going to talk about today, in addition to just talking about control towers in general, about what that means from a Sterling point of view, is our inventory control tower, which is a commercial offering we introduced this year. So first, a little bit of positioning. I'm going to show some numbers, and this is really about justifying why we are in the control tower space, and hopefully you'll relate to some of this. We speak a lot with analysts, and analysts are showing that there's a ultra high degree of inefficient decision making around inventory planning. Inventory managers are unnecessarily adjusting inventory positions based upon gut feel or just knowledge that they have around the system without data to back up the reason why they're making those decisions. And that ends up with a huge number of suboptimal decisions around inventory planning and inventory placement. A lot of times inventory planners are relocating inventory solely based on how much on-hand inventory they see that might be in surplus, without regard to should that surplus inventory be moved from its current location. What is the demand on that inventory? What is the propensity for that inventory to be sold and to be subject to revenue generating activity? I don't want to deplenish that. I don't want to be in a stock outage situation. But what we're seeing is that a lot of inventory planners are lacking the data necessary to make an intelligent decision around inventory planning. And that's where the control towers can really help with that decision making, because most of the data that's necessary for making an accurate decision is located in lots of different siloed systems, not just in that one ERP or not just in that one warehouse management system, but lots of different systems. And that's where control towers can help. That's where they excel at bringing together data from lots of different locations to give you that singular view to allow you to make decisions with better data. So a lot of our customers are trying to avoid things like markdowns and out of stock situations. Markdowns are a result of something unplanned, and out of stock situations are causing loss of business to competitors. The analysts who survey a lot of customers that we deal with say that almost a third of them are noting that external factors have a lot to do with markdown situations, such as sudden consumer behavior changes like COVID impacts. Christian and Amar talked about the demand sensing and planning process around observing those disruptions and adjusting plans associated with that. So that's where that becomes really, really important. But things like weather impact to your supply lines, seeing a tsunami in Southeast Asia or hurricanes impacting the Atlantic coast and ports need to alert you that perhaps your shipping lanes need adjusting to prevent impacts from events like that as well. Human beings cannot simply stay on top of all this. There's way too much data that they have to observe. And if they try to manage inventory planning by observing the data real time, they will miss something. And that's where AI comes into play to look for anomalies under normal behavior and alert you when there's an exception. Amar talked about exception-based planning. For human beings to effectively control a supply chain as large as yours, they have to be able to transition to exception-based planning and exception-based reaction. We're looking for the exceptions, not the rule, and managing disruptions based on an exception-based process to avoid revenue loss. So, as I mentioned earlier, supply chain optimization and inventory status visibility remains to be the single largest challenge our customers have. And it's rooted in the fact that the source of this data is spread out over a plethora of different types of systems and managed by teams that perhaps don't even work together or work well together. We see that in a lot of our customers. The EDI team and the IT team and the business owners and inventory planners maybe don't talk as well together or collaborate as well together as they should. And that creates a whole different type of problem. So control towers are meant to provide that single open aggregation point that brings together data from lots of different systems, normalizes it to a single data model, provides analytics and visualization on that single data model, and then gives you that insights that allow you to make a decision about what to do next. It's not an easy problem collecting data from all these different sources. You have to be able to have access to them, access to those sources, be it a TMS system, an ERP system, whatever it might be. And sometimes it's a different company that is helping you with some of that, like a logistics provider. So just to be quite honest with you, control towers are great for aggregating data, but there's a discrete challenge in getting access to that data and massaging it into the format that brings it into that common data format. So regardless of the control tower solution you're looking at, whether it's something we help you with or one you're building yourself, that is most likely the largest challenge you're going to have ahead of you, is getting access to that data and normalizing it for use. So let's talk about the inventory control tower itself. So as I mentioned, control towers are positioned to aggregate data from siloed systems, from external data sources that you may or may not own, and to help unify siloed processes. I mentioned that successful technology adoption is really a stepwise process in organic growth. We overlay a very similar view around control tower adoption, around this idea of see, then predict, then act. You're going to see this as a theme and what I'm talking about around seeing, predicting, and acting. The first step is just getting access to that visibility data, to bring it in, to aggregate it, to normalize it, and then see what it looks like end to end. That's the first step. Then from there, you can start refining KPIs. You can start refining measurements that are important to you. What are the thresholds What are the yellow line thresholds and the red line thresholds against those KPIs that if those are exceeded, you want to know about them. So the next step along this journey of adopting a control tower is then now you have all the data. Now you need to build those predictive insights around that data that are important to you. And then that last step of maturity is act. Okay, great. Now you're seeing that there's a disruption. What do I do about it? What do I need to do? What are the tools I have available to me that allow me to then act on that insight and prevent disruption or prevent impact to my customers? So see, predict, then act is the maturity cycle of control tower adoption. So let's dive into those three in just a little bit more detail. What do each one of those mean? So first, that first step around C is that end-to-end visibility. It's about getting access to the relevant data in the various systems that you need to pull together, and we can help you with that. Amar represents a team that works very closely with us from a consultative perspective who can help you identify those data sources and help you normalize that data into the control tower data model. So the data you pull and that you, especially around inventory, let's talk about inventory. Inventory control tower models inventory placement by nodes, and a node can be anywhere that inventory sits, distribution centers, warehouses, even retail stores. So we have a lot of customers who use our solutions around vendor managed inventory, VMI. They have the ability to get inventory placement at the store level, and they have active control over the inventory at a store level. So they're not relying on the store necessarily to manage the inventory for them. They get direct view into that and they can manage it on their own. So we can model stores as holding inventory. We have a customer that I'm going to talk about in a little bit, Lenovo, very large computer company working very closely with IBM. Lenovo has a very complex supply chain, and they model their supplier inventories and in-transit inventory as part of their view into inventory as well. So you can see movement of inventory as a function of inventory placement as well. It's not just about necessarily what you have on hand, but what is in transit, what is on the way. So you can do better planning from that perspective as well. Then predict. So now that I have all the data aggregated, I have a view into where inventory is placed by node. I am also bringing in demand plans from continuous intelligent planning. So everything that Christian talked about around demand sensing feeds the demand planning cycle. The output of the demand planning cycle is a demand plan. That is what you import into the inventory control tower. And you'll see there's a diagram here that you see in the screenshot. It's not very clear, and there's some detail below it that's missing. But what this will show you in a table below is inventory on hand against inventory demand and my plan. So you can see real performance in an easily consumable graph of how inventory is moved against the supply plan and the demand plan that I've imported into inventory control tower. So you get a quick view on the performance of your planning against actual movement of your inventory. And so if you see something wrong, these KPIs up here will give you indications of things like excess inventory on hand or nodes that are reaching out of stock situations so that you can take corrective action right there. And then act. What do we do about it? So we see a problem. What is it that we actually can do about it? We can create linkages in inventory control tower to your order management system, whether it is either ours, Sterling Order Management, or one of your own creation. And we can send signals to the order management system to move inventory, to rebalance inventory straight from the inventory control tower. So that's a discrete action you can take in ICT to rebalance inventory, to prevent a disruption, to prevent an out of stock situation, or to rebalance surplus stock to other locations. We also provide resolution rooms, which is a real-time collaboration platform that allows you to bring in maybe your logistics provider or your store manager, or maybe your distribution centers who have inventory or who could respond to a disruption. You can bring them into an active chat session. It resembles other persistent chat applications like Slack or Microsoft Teams or similar things. where you can bring outside people, outside your organization, outside your enterprise, or inside your enterprise into an active chat session to work on a problem. That chat session is integrated with our Watson AI capabilities. So you can ask natural language questions around inventory, around the problem, and bring in statistics, bring in data into the session. The other thing that our resolution rooms will do is they observe the conversation as it happens. What are the actions that are taken? What are the questions that are asked, and what are the answers given? And it remembers that, it records that, and it creates a playbook from that. And that playbook becomes something that you can replay over time. So if you have another similar stock outage situation or another similar disruption in the future, you can bring back that playbook as a basis for how do you tackle this problem again. So you can save all that discovery, reuse what was done last time as a basis for how do you resolve that issue this time. That preserves the human element that was talked about earlier. You cannot remove the human element from supply chain management and optimization because humans are largely involved in disruption management. And so this allows you to continue that human-based process of disruption management and resolution. Over time, we will be introducing more mature AI-based automation where now that you have a resolution process, how can we help you automate that? How can we help you build trust in the process so that you don't have to bring together a team of people to resolve a problem? You can actually build an automated process that does that on behalf of humans and build trust in that system. So you'll be seeing some of that coming as well. See, then predict, then act is really the maturity adoption curve of a control tower. Pause there. Any questions or comments so far? Okay.
So we have,
go ahead.
We have a couple of questions in chat, and I think I'm not sure if it's more to Amar and you. When you mentioned 15% reduction in inventory is driven by continuous planning, what is driving that reduction? Automation or implementation via advanced models of inventory policies?
Yeah, let me address that. So when we look at the inventory reduction opportunities, right? So there are two levers which we typically look at. So one, because of better forecasting, you are able to take the right sizing of the manufacturing as well as inventory positioning information, depending upon how much to manufacture. That is an improvement, but that's always I have seen being debated that fine, you gave me a better forecast, but then it's not absolutely necessary that my inventory will get reduced because there are other decisions. There are other decisions. For example, a lot of times inventory is kept as a buffer. The decisions for inventory buffers can be reduced if there can be better understanding of the near-term fluctuations as well. And that's where the demand sensing, and that's where for example, what Marshall was mentioning about the visibility into the supply, the confidence on the supply, the confidence on whether I will receive product on time, being able to run those simulations, that is what actually allows the organizations to start shaving off the inventory positions they are keeping more as response to the near term or the shorter term unreliability or fluctuations in their actual supply chain execution components. So better visibility as well as the processes for getting more confidence on those execution, because there is more automated control on the processes to escalate and resolve ahead of time and not as a firefighting activity. So that's the benchmark which we had used for doing this 1, 2, 3 accumulation of the benefits on inventory for that benchmark.
Okay, and then we have another question, and I think sort of addresses that C point, right? Is that about the get accurate real-time ATP inventory? But in reality, right, if we are working across several time zones, we're working across several geographies, it's not always could be latest, right? So sometimes latest might be a couple hours old from US and 3 days old from Epic because of the different ingest schedule failures, etc. So how can we actually warn the users that that this data is actually real time and this one is delayed? So how is there some kind of the warning? So is there some kind of the exclusion? How do we sort of balance this very large international organization? Maybe data from ships is delayed, or data from other vessels is delayed. So how do we do that?
Marshall, you want to address that from the inventory perspective, or you want I can talk about more from a planning data consumption perspective as well?
Yeah, let's do both, and I'll start. So one of the underpinning capabilities of the inventory control tower is a function called inventory visibility, and it relies on real-time inventory updates from your systems to be able to give ATP responses and or availability to promise. So the system does rely on the accuracy of the data coming in. So the system is only as good as the accuracy of the data ingest. But it is designed to give millisecond type responses to that type of query about availability to promise. So you described that you have systems that inventory positions are more batch oriented, that you get daily updates on inventory position versus real-time updates. So how possible would it be for us to be able to get more real-time inventory placement information rather than waiting for those daily batch-oriented updates? Could we, for example, create linkages directly to your inventory management systems or your inventory location or allocation so that we could pull that data more real-time?
Yeah, and now taking that more from a planning view perspective, because I think the data has different uses, right? I mean, if somebody just wants a snapshot of where is the inventory available exactly because they want to do some transaction, then I think what Marshall mentioned is that's the approach which we have, and that's where the limitation would start creeping in, because if the data is 3 days old, we wouldn't. But now, if I'm now using that data more for my planning decisions, I think that's where, as a part of the intelligent workflows, when the data is consumed, there are ways of defining, for example, the recency of the data, and that can get factored into either the process, or as you had called out, that on the visibility, it can call out that the data is as per the latest by this date, right? When was the data latest updated or refreshed? That can be brought in, but also in the simulation models or the analytics model, it can factor in that the data is 1 day old, which means it would account for that margin of error of saying, what is the probability of this data having changed? But because it is a day old data, and that can get factored into the models where when you start using that data for making some simulated decisions or triggering off any workflows. But I agree, this is always a challenge, and there are different components of the data, which will have different levels of accuracy. For example, logistics and the shipping data and all of that information, more and more the expectation is it gets more closer to near real time. Whereas some of the information where there might be systemic challenges, for example, around manufacturing information, whether the production schedule was completed or not, whether the batch was completed or not, some of it could depend upon whether those underlying systems are tracking that information or not. And then that has to get baked into the models and the algorithms we'll create. Because if we are going to train AI to start taking some automated decisioning or recommendations, it should know what is the margin of error on the data as well.
Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other questions pending right now?
Not as of now.
Okay. So I'm watching the time. We're nearing the end of our segment, so I'm going to focus on a few remaining important topics on the control tower. So this is a visualization of how the inventory control tower works, and let's walk through it from the bottom up. So as I mentioned, one of the purposes of a control tower, and in particular our inventory control tower, is to aggregate data from multiple disparate sources. And we look at the sources largely in 3 categories. There's the inventory you have on hand that might be represented by different things, in-store inventory, distribution center inventory, maybe what's ready to distribute from your breweries. but that's data that you own. And then you have third-party or partner data, logistics providers, what they have in transit, other distributors that are partnering with you, but they have data of their own. And then there's demand channel information, which is everything that Christian and Amar talked about. That's also important input to the inventory control tower. So these three data sources have to be identified and connected with. And as I mentioned earlier, this represents one of the largest parts of the adoption of a control tower, is getting access to this inventory and normalizing it, basically formatting it for the API calls into the control tower and getting it inputted or ingested in the control tower. But once there, the control tower does the data mapping and correlation. It takes all these data sources, all this data from different systems that are in different formats using different identifications, different identifiers. You may have an order number for a supply order here or a purchase order here that correlates to a shipment order in another system, but the ID correlation may not be exact. There may be a different attribute on the actual business object you need to correlate with. So that's what the data mapping and correlation engine as part of the control tower does. It creates that graph, if you will, representation of how orders to shipments to invoices are all correlated, that all come or emerge from different systems. It also takes in unstructured data like weather data or socioeconomic data as an overlay, a geospatial overlay to those discrete business processes happening along the supply chain, and creates overlays for that too. That's the engine that makes up the heart of the control tower. The results of all this then become visualized and available to your business users via personalized dashboards, where you show the KPIs and the thresholds and the alerts that are interesting to you, as well as pivots to the details. The control tower is also maybe the first place you go, place you log in every morning, and you get an instant view of the health of your inventory placement worldwide. And then you can pivot down into greater detail or across to your other applications like your TMS or your WMS. And there's ways to extend the control tower navigation to include those other systems to make it easier to go to those without having to then leave the control tower and go log in somewhere else. So think of it as kind of your portal, your entry point into the overall inventory management space. And then from there, you kind of work down into the lower level details. It's also the user experience that gives you that resolution rooms with intelligent collaboration and playbooks that I mentioned earlier. The control tower is going to be the place that will evolve, that will include lots of different capabilities as we make them available. So it remains to be your one place that you go to get additional capabilities offered by the control tower, as well as perhaps other Sterling capabilities that we integrate. What else do I want to show you? So Vincent wanted to make sure I talked about a customer reference around control towers. We've been a long time partner of Lenovo's, and Lenovo, of course, being a worldwide server and PC manufacturer, as well as personal electronics provider. They have a massive supply chain, as you can imagine, and it is extremely long, both downstream and upstream. So they had a massive visibility issue. And they work with thousands of component providers. You think about a laptop and everything that goes into a laptop, from storage to compute to cooling to LCD screen and a chassis. They have a huge number of different component providers that go into the manufacture of a computer. And so visibility into the health of that entire supply chain is a huge problem. So we helped by providing an inventory control tower to them that links in not only what they have on hand, but what's coming from their suppliers. So going back to that point where we can model inventory not only by what you have on hand and what you own, but what is also due to you from suppliers. They also were one of the first to correlate unstructured data from weather. So they bring in weather data and overlay weather events around their supply chain so they can look for disruptions, because their supply chain stretch around the globe, and weather has a very large impact on availability of parts and components that are critical to their manufacturing process. We provide the predictive insights through our AI and machine learning that gives them that ability to get ahead of disruption before it becomes impactful. And they were one of the first customers that really started playing with that resolution room capability and helped us hone those playbooks that allow the replay of common disruptions to make the next resolution that much faster. Lenovo is a very good partner of ours and a really, really good success story. So I want to kind of move out of inventory control tower as a, I didn't realize there were animations here. Let me get through this animation. I really just want to get to this picture here. So when you look at the Sterling product set, we usually depict our Sterling product set as a layered diagram like this, where at the bottom we have a supply chain business network, which is similar to other business networks that manage the exchange of data. But what we've been building is this layer on top of that, which is supply chain insights. This is the intelligent services layer that powers all of our control towers. So if you think of it from a logical order, we have the network, which is the exchange of data. We have the supply chain insights layer, which observes the data, evolves the data, derives insights from the data. And then we have all of our applications built on top of that make use of those insights. The control tower is an application type like inventory control tower that sits on top of it all, that can link in some of these other applications that we have. For example, the inventory control tower links in an inventory visibility app that we have, but it provides that umbrella view, if you will, of visibility across multiple applications. But I want to talk a little bit about the supply chain insights portion of this platform. So if I fast forward to this view, what we've done in supply chain insights is we've created a common canonical data model that we move all data into. Think of it as a common supply chain language that all data is modified and put into. That allows us to create that correlation I mentioned. It allows us to create a common set of AI and machine learning models on top of the data, because once the data is normalized to that canonical form, it makes it that much easier to add value-added intelligent services and build applications. And as we add more data sources, like your data sources, that gets normalized to this model, the applications don't have to learn about that data because it's consistent with our internal model. It allows us to then centralize all the insights and analytics that all of our applications make use of. And any new applications that maybe you build on top of this platform, or a Mars team might build for you on top of this platform, are getting the benefits of that common data language and common insights layer down below. The other thing that is part of the supply chain insights platform is a rules engine. This rules engine is based on Flink, the open source rules engine process you may be familiar with, but it's there that we build the rule language that, as data is ingested, the data is observed and the rules are applied against the data, and new insights are derived from that, such as KPI calculations, additional derived data values, or even complex event processing, looking for patterns across multiple events, multiple objects, that is used for things like anomaly detection. When are things off basis? When should I be alerted because something is not quite right? This rules engine allows you to not only take advantage of the rules that we have built as part of the platform, but add your own. So what are the rules that are important to you? What are the KPIs that are important to you? That allows you to extend our platform with additional rule sets. And it's an open platform. It's based upon GraphQL as an API language. There is also a REST API set that allows you to ingest data and get data out. And that makes it that much easier to build applications on top of this platform. So I just want to give you a flavor of the underpinnings of the control tower, because it's not only a discrete offering, inventory control tower being something we could actually sell to you, but it's also a platform itself that you can build additional capabilities on. Yes. And with that, I think we have a couple minutes left. I think we'll stop there.
Yes, thank you, Marshall. So just to conclude, we have 2 minutes left. I first definitely would like to thank you very much. Would you be okay that you stop sharing the screen so that I can beam something, Marshall, as well? So thanks a lot for everyone for having joined the call. We would just want to be very respectful of your time. So I suggest that we simply close here. Yes, these are our, I mean, we are, Walter and myself, I would say your main contact points and entry points for within IBM for all your questions. So please do not hesitate to reach out to us anyways, would it be by email, LinkedIn, or mobile phone. Thanks a lot to everyone. Also, I really would like to thanks and congratulate my colleagues from IBM. I feel it was a very good conversation. It was not a series of presentations. So thanks for your questions and your passion for driving your business to the EBI team. But also thanks a lot to my colleagues, because I feel I feel proud after those 2 hours for those good conversations. Okay. Any last comments or questions before we close and you leave?
No, I just want to say a big thank you, Marshall. So it was very clear, your presentation and that explanation. It actually covered a lot of the questions I had in my mind. So it's maybe even good that I didn't start to jump to the question and first really listen to you so carefully. So thank you very much. It was very valid and interesting.
Thank you, Olga.
All right. Well,